and welcome back to the Let Kids Be Kids desk. I'm here today with Emma. She's from Auckland, and we're here to talk about the Keeping Ourselves Safe program. But before we get into it, Emma, do you just want to do a quick introduction as to who you are in regards to your role as a mum and also in your professional career?
Hi, I'm Emma. I am a mum, very much a mum, and I have 4 children aged from 6 through to 19, 2 girls and 2 boys. And I have been in education for over 25 years, started out pretty much in primary school teaching and ended up now in early childhood, owning early childhood centres. So yeah, approximately 25 years hanging out in the education system.
Yeah, and you're a really good person to talk to because obviously with the spread of the ages of your children, you've seen the changes and the shifts in education over that time, but also as an educator in both early childhood and in education and school education. So it's good to start with that because sometimes us parents get labeled as being lots of different things because we are questioning what's going on in the system. If I knew anybody who had a valid point of view on it, especially with the little e's, it would be you. So thank you for being here today and also for being part of Let Kids Be Kids. So we are going to look at the Keeping Ourselves Safe program, which is run by the New Zealand Police, and it's been in schools for years and years. So tell me a little bit about your situation and when you started looking at this and why.
Okay, so my beautiful daughter is 6, so year 1, 6 at a local school. And her teacher actually put out on Seesaw page that later in the year we would be looking at the Keeping Ourselves Safe program. And she attached a link to it and kind of encouraged us to go and check out the resources. And so I did park it in the back of my mind because I'm very aware now that we have to actually look at everything that our children are being taught. So, yeah, then time went by and then a friend of mine who came to me and she said, Emma, have you looked at that Keeping Ourselves Safe resource yet? And I said, oh, shoot. No, I need to do that. Because she said, look, I've looked at it for my child who's year 5 and it's absolutely horrific. And there's no way he'll be taking part in it. And I'm thinking, I'm going to email the principal. You go have a look. So I was like, absolutely. So I clicked on the link, clicked on the first couple of bits and was like, oh, yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, okay. And then I just kept clicking. And you have to click quite a lot. It's not obvious to you. Keep clicking. And then I got into like the lesson plans and the language that were being used. And I read it and I just went, absolutely no way is this something that my 6-year-old needs to participate in at all. So from that, I did quickly email the principal, CCing the teacher in and saying, I have just reviewed these lesson plans and documents. I'm not happy. I want to know exactly way more about this because I feel I wouldn't be the only parent if parents were aware of what the resourcing was. And it's due to start next week, so we need to know more information because my daughter will not be involved in this whatsoever. And then I commented on our classroom page that I had looked at the resources. Thank you to the teacher. I looked at the resources, big fat no from me. There's no way my 6-year-old will be involved in anything around this. And then I contacted a few of them because I don't know too many mums out that way, but I contacted the ones that I knew and a couple on the board. And they were like, oh my gosh, oh my goodness. So because I took screenshots on my phone, I sent it to them and they're like, no. And so then I probably got about 7 or 8 parents that emailed back to the class page, message back to say, absolutely, our child's out. And then from then, the principal has never been quick at emailing me back in the past, but he was relatively quick back. And he was concerned and said, absolutely, I understand. We will not be running this program from next week. We'll be looking at it at a staff meeting on the Wednesday, and I will come back to you when I know more about what we're doing. And then I went back again with, like, well, I want to know who okayed this program, other teachers teaching it, who's teaching it. And he never really kind of answered me back, but he said to me, after my meeting, I will come back to you and we will share information that we need. And then meanwhile, teacher emailed me and actually put on the whole classroom chat, I will not be teaching these parts of this topic. And when I spoke to her, she said, look, I'm absolutely not teaching any of this stuff. And then I think it must have gone. So I believe in the staff meeting, 3 teachers just stood up and said, "We are not teaching this." So that's got it pushed out.
That's great. Do you
And
think that they would have done that had there not have been a parent response? Because that's quite a good
yeah,
response, eh? From
yeah, and we did, and it wasn't just me. There was me and my girlfriend's who really pushed it for her kids and got it out there. And I spoke to other parents and said, "Look, spread the word, share it, share it, share it." So there
Mm.
was a huge influx of emails to the principal to say, "Hang on, no way, we need to know more."
It must
So then,
it must in some schools come down to the principal and the teacher relationship with the principal, of how much
yeah,
the teacher can say, no, this is not good versus
mm,
just do as you're told. Can I just go back and ask, just to clarify for people, the Keeping Ourselves Safe program is not the sex ed program. It's not relationships and sexuality, right? It's separate from that, and it comes into schools by the police as a safety program, safety from abuse, and it's been
mm.
run in the schools for a lot of years. And you were saying you used to teach it yourself, right?
Yes, I taught it years ago in primary, and it was a really great resource. It was talking about pretty much that you are an awesome person, talking about good things you're good at, knowing your name, your phone number, your address. Um, Maybe it touched on a little bit of bullying, just like being kind to other people. But I've never taught anything sexual about around anything sexual whatsoever, especially talking about, assuming genders and um, sexual parts and bits and
Yeah.
pieces. Right?
So talk to me about the key things that you saw when you had a look that raised a massive red flag for you.
So the few red flags. One was about the teacher never assuming gender. That you cannot assume that they're all just boys and girls and their families. And I'm just like, well, that goes against everything I believe in my family. And I told the principal this because we actually met with the principal and had a meeting with him. In my cultural belief, my religious belief, my personal belief, my valued belief, everything is that there are two genders, boys and girls. And that's what my daughter knows, and that's what she'll continue to know. So she doesn't need to know about any other form of whatever else people think that there is. And I'm quite straight up on that. It spoke about people and children in general not having, like, we're not to say boys have penises and girls have vaginas. It's children now, and children or people. And that, again, is incorrect in my own beliefs. That's not at all how it works. Another part that was awful was that we're trying to get rid of the words of mum and dad. It was we're to refrain from using mums and dads. You are to use the words parents and caregivers. And I
Mm.
made it very clear to the principal that McKenna has a mum and a dad, and she has one sister and 2 brothers. And the sister is a girl, and the brothers are boys, and that's what it is, and that's what we are. So those were the real key things that stood up. Also talked about sexual touching and what that is, and with including putting things in mouths and vaginas and things. And I was just like, my 6-year-old doesn't need to know any of this stuff. Why do we need to create anxiety and open her up to all this awfulness, which she's not aware of?
Can I ask you a question as a mum and as also an experienced educator of young people and someone who has taught this before? Because I have also interviewed a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, and I've asked her this question as well. Is there a good enough reason to be teaching 5 and 6-year-olds all about vulvas and penises and scrotums and anuses and using those words?
No, not in my experience. No, like I haven't. I've seen, as I said, I have seen a case of sexual abuse in primary school, but I've never really come across anything else in my whole 25 years plus of teaching. I I don't believe that there is a need for it, or if you are and you choose as your family whether it's something your children want to know about, right? So in my family, we do talk about penises and fannies, and that's, when we're talking about things or whatever. Um, but it's something that we do as a family. It's a conversation we have. At no point would I give the ownership over to a teacher to start doing that. And I understand when you get to, and back in my day, it was year 7 and 8 where we had these discussions about periods and how a baby was made, and it was very, a penis and a vagina. It was very to the point of what happened. I don't know why we need to be pushing these words now upon our young children. Now, I did speak to a lady once who does teach these courses, and she said, you know, if a child is being abused, they need to be able to say that it was a penis, and know these body parts. Because if they called their vagina something like another word, somebody wouldn't be able to understand what that was. So catching them the right terminology is correct. And at the time, I kind of went, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." And then later, I thought, "Well, actually, no. I think you're eventually going to figure it out, right? I don't think."
I think that the responsibility needs to be on the adult to be able to
Mm,
interpret what the child is saying, not
mm,
actually open slather on the child.
mm,
This is a big discussion, really, because I'm not the expert in this, but you talk to people who have gone through the lived experience who are saying this is not the right way to approach this. And
mm,
then we also have the data on how bad things are out there. And so it's like, well,
mm.
if you're implementing it and it doesn't seem to be helping, perhaps this isn't the right approach.
I think the data is it's getting worse, right? I think it is getting worse, and I don't believe us all teaching kids about incorrect sexual touching at 5 and 6 is the answer by any means. We're just taking away their innocence and giving them way more anxiety, which, again, and they could come home and start questioning things in your own home. And now they're pushing so much on our children to speak to teachers that, my daughter could say something to a teacher and they go, "Oh gosh, that's something that we need to look at," because she's had it all put into her head, right?
The narrative has changed from a predator being a a man in a black coat that's a complete stranger to the family to understanding the data that is that a lot of abuses are known to the child. So
Mm.
we're not refuting that claim. It's more like, well, with that data, is this the wisest approach? Is it the wisest approach to lump the responsibility on the child of needing to decide what is consent and what isn't, of needing to decide how to explain to people exactly which part of their body has been touched? Is that the best approach? Or is there perhaps something where, so we were talking before we recorded about your examples of where you have had families where abuses occurred. You're trained as a teacher to notice signs and signals, right? You're trained to understand when you're seeing anomalies in behavior and things like that. You would then ring fence that child and support them? Right.
Absolutely, and I have had that, and it was all about that child. It wasn't about, "Oh, quick, let's go educate the whole classroom about sexual touching."
Yes. I think that's a really important conversation to have because I feel like in all things we are scraping the bottom of the barrel because an issue has been noticed in society, and their solution to it is to then educate the children about the situation rather than protect the children more and get adults to be doing their job, which is to be protecting the children.
I know, and it's like, I did mention to you before about the Kia Kaha program, which is one which the school has said they won't be doing the Keeping Ourselves Safe program at this point, but they're replacing it with this Kia Kaha program. So looking into that, and it's about bullying. I believe that all children should be taught to be kind, be nice to each other, regardless of what you look like or who you are. Absolutely. But this program touches on if you're homophobic and if you're racist, all these different forms of bullying and what it kind of comes under the umbrella of it. And I'm like, why do our children need to know that? Why do our 5 and 6 year olds need to know about homophobia? They don't need to know about homophobia. They don't even need to know what a homosexual is, right? Let alone what homophobic is.
It's just putting people in more and more boxes, and it's
Mm,
playing the whole stigmatized, victimized, hyper focusing and segregating of people. It's actually is discrimination because you're
mm,
starting to put labels onto everybody where it's like someone's going to treat you bad. It doesn't matter what color their skin is or what
mm,
clothes they're wearing. The behavior is what you're looking at. And the same the other
mm,
way. If you're going to be out there being a good person, you're going to be a good person no matter what people look like or what race they are or what language they speak, right?
mm, mm. Absolutely. And yeah, so we definitely, our kids are being brought up in a very grown up world. And that's why it's like, I always say, let kids be kids. They don't need to know all of this. Just let them be innocent. Teach them reading and writing and maths and leave it alone because it's not okay. And I was really impressed with how many parents were agreed. And I know that my girlfriend actually called the chair of the board and shared stuff with him, and he just went, "Oh my goodness, no way." So the sad thing was, we're running this program in the school. No one's actually looked at the resources. And what were they just going to look at, like the day before they were going to do it, bring up that lesson plan and go, oh gosh, hang on, look at this. It really needed to be pulled apart. When we met with the principal, I didn't really say, in the future, anything. I said, I'm going to be that parent you hear from all the time. I said, but in the future, you need to be able to be transparent as with everything that you're doing in every lesson plan and the language and everything that's going on. Because I know for a fact there are a lot of parents here that will not want their children to be involved in this. And there may be a few that don't mind it, possibly, but I believe the majority, when they feel actually empowered by people like myself and my friends that kind of started the ball rolling and shared stuff, and they were like, oh my goodness, yeah, we got messages saying, thank you so much for being an advocate for our children, because we just assumed keeping ourselves safe, written by the Ministry of Education and Police Force, is going to be lovely. It's
Yeah.
not. Once you can start to empower people, we actually can make a difference.
Yeah, and it raises what you were saying about the shock, really, when you do start asking questions that the teachers are about to teach something and they haven't even looked at it. Like
Mm,
they're
mm,
pulling a resource off the shelf or they've been sent something. This is not what education was,
mm,
years ago when they would be developing their own stuff. And if programs like this would come in, the police would come in and teach it. But it wouldn't have this ideology
no.
that's seeped into it. Like, why is ideology about gender identity in here about sexual abuse? It seems to be they're just sort of feeding out the threads of it into anything they can get it into.
And it's just sad. Our children are losing their innocence. Just let, as I say, let kids be kids. Let them just do what they do, right? And it doesn't need to be in a some. You know, you don't need to assume anything, because even in ECE now, they're pushing the assumption of never assuming genders and things like that. And it's just like, just let our kids be. Let them do what they do.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean anything. Like my son, for nearly 6 months, lived in a Minnie Mouse dress. He absolutely loved it. But it did not mean that he was a girl trapped inside a boy's body. It was just him being imaginative, creative, expressive, having some fun,
But if
you
they'd have
know?
gotten hold of him, that's what they would have told
Mm,
him.
yeah.
Tell me, did you look much in the keeping ourselves safe stuff around what they taught about consent? Because there was stuff about consent in this one for junior schools.
Yes, I
Looks
did
roll.
look at something consent, but I can't quote you to it. But it did talk about being able to say no. Um,
What do you
but I
think
haven't
about
got it.
5 and 6 year olds being taught about consent?
No, like I just this not even talk about the topic, because I mean, when I read about what for her classroom, it was about consenting to sexual touch and what sexual touch is, and it's about touching vaginas and penises and putting things in your mouth. And I'm like, how are you going to teach my daughter that? I mean, well, the fact is, you're not going to teach my daughter that. But
Over
how
your
does
dead
that?
body.
No,
Yeah.
but how does that even become a conversation that you have?
Yeah.
So I don't believe children need to know anything about consent. What we need to be teaching our children is your body is your body. It's a special thing for you, and I believe probably something like other people are not allowed to touch it. But we just keep very generalized, right? We don't need to go into great
Yeah.
detail about what that is. And I think I remember teaching, just talking about your body's your body. It's a special thing, and it's something that's special for you. But I don't think we need to go on to what is good touching, what is bad touching,
Well, when I
and
was looking at it, because they go into quite a lot of detail about your genitalia, I was like,
mm,
wow, that's really burdensome for a 5 year old to be like quite burdened about all of the different parts of their genitalia. And so
mm,
now they've got to make sure that they don't consent by accident to some of that, or maybe they are allowed to consent to it, and it's all very confusing. And kids are so literal, right? Like
mm,
that kids take this stuff really, really literally. Like it's so overwhelming for kids. They're not going to carry this stuff lightly and brush it off and just
mm,
be educated by it. They will be they'll be robbed of their innocence. There's a little video in the one for your daughter's age group called Consent for Kids, and I watched it and then I sent it out to some of our parents and just asked if they would feedback. And the feedback was that this video reeks of undermining parental authority.
yeah,
Because it starts to get little kids going, no, I don't consent, and gives them the big no when
mm.
actually at that age, well, children, this is where roles have been totally diminished. Children don't always know what's best for them.
No,
right?
I think
Parents are
right,
parents because
yeah,
they
for a reason.
respect that children are to be protected and loved and looked after. And the children are out there thinking that they've got to fight in this big world themselves and having to
But
deal
we
with.
should be fighting it for them, right? That's what we're here for.
Exactly. We should be fighting it for them. We should be looking after them. If there are children who aren't getting that care and support at home, particularly at these young ages, that's a bigger societal problem. And I go back to like in schools and in early childhood centres, my understanding is that that's part of what you guys learn so that you can pick up on that because you're the eyes and ears of society outside of the family.
Mm,
But not that
mm,
there's an assumption that it's happening in every family, because I think a lot of good families are getting caught up in this because they don't
yeah.
even realize they're the ones that trusting the system.
Mm. And I think it depends on your teacher too, because you're going to get some teachers that, luckily, like my daughter's was like, no way. You're going to get some teachers that just go, oh, okay, this is what we're doing. And that's when they start, like that scenario I gave you before about the little girl that didn't want to go to bed because she was scared she was going to wake up in the morning feeling different and possibly being a boy because the teacher had spoken about that. You know, you might wake up some mornings and just feel a bit different and unsure about who you are. So from this conversation, which the teacher probably never thought was going to actually do any damage, this young girl didn't want to go to bed because she was scared she was going to wake up a boy. You know, like
Because they take it
it's
literally.
yeah, and it's really controlling over our children, and our kids have enough to worry about these days. And I just try and keep my kids as safe and protected and as innocent for as long as possible. And I don't believe this keeping ourselves safe program is required at all. Definitely teach children about self-esteem and being happy and playing outside and eating well and getting good sleep and good sunshine and having lots of friends and what being nice is like. And, you know, we don't want to hurt anybody, those things, absolutely. But that's where it stops.
Yeah,
It doesn't
focusing
need
on
to
the
be anymore.
positive things, right? Because
Mm,
it
mm.
burdens them. It's like going
There's
back
no
to what we
positiveness.
share
It's just
about
all
that.
about negative. Yeah.
Yeah, when we share about that identity triangle now and we talk about basic humanity and
Yeah.
character,
Mm,
like where is anything about bolstering the child's confidence of how awesome they are and that the world is not always a terrifying place. It can be
mm,
it is an amazing place. It depends on what your
mm,
focus is on. So they're having these, no wonder we have a generation of young people that have anxiety problems, right? Because they're just being told the problems of adult society
mm,
time
mm.
without looking at the beauty of it. I just want to read out this quote by Corrie ten Boom because it kind of wraps it up really well, I think. As a girl, she was sitting next to her father on the train and said, "Father, what is sex sin?" And he turned and looked at me as he always did when answering a question, and he said nothing. At last he stood up, lifted his travelling case from the rack over our heads and set it on the floor. "Will you carry it off the train, Corrie?" he said. I stood up and tugged at it. It was crammed with watches and spare parts he'd purchased that morning. "It's too heavy," I said. "Yes," he said, "and I would be a pretty poor father who would ask his little girl to carry such a load. It's the same way, Corrie, with knowledge. Some knowledge is too heavy for children. When you are older and stronger, you can bear it. For now, you must trust me to carry it for you. Today, we ask our children to carry loads that are just way too heavy for them. And this is exactly what
Mm,
we're doing. We're loading our children with these heavy, heavy burdens of adult problems, societal
mm,
problems that aren't actually everywhere, they are just somewhere. And suddenly we have this problem where it is everywhere and our children are suffering. Our families have been, the parents have been diminished, their role and their responsibility has been diminished. And what I see more and more through these documents, through the media, is that parents are cast with suspicion and disregard and also quite blatantly being explained as being unable to teach their children these things.
and I'm also finding, like, you know, speak to your teachers, speak to your counselors. And in this document, it talks about safe touching from doctors. What makes doctors okay for safe touching? And especially now, how we've got this push, you know, for puberty blockers and all these things that are happening. And we know that New Zealand's one of the worst countries in the world for this. You know, if let's say my daughter was a couple of years older and she went to the doctor and said something, you know, unusual, he might be the first one that says, "Oh, well, actually, you could possibly be experiencing trans, you know, gender, whatever it's called, and you know, wanting to change gender." And she's been taught that these doctors are trustful people too, and they're not all very trustful these days. I don't believe, Penny. So.
The other thing I want to raise on that actually, because again, I was looking at the early, the younger years one for 5 and 6 year olds, and it talks in I think it's in part two, it talks all about, it teaches them all about their genitalia names again, and then it's actually talking about hygiene. So my first question is, why are they talking about hygiene when it's a keeping ourselves safe program? But then it says, there's another activity which explains reasons to know their genitalia is so they can speak about it with the doctor. Now, these are
Mm.
5 and 6
It will
year
be with their
who
parents,
will
correct?
always be with
Yeah,
their parents. You can't
yeah.
go, you don't go and see the doctor without your parents until you're 16. So 10 years prior to them ever being in the room with a doctor without the parent, they're being told that the reason for teaching about
Mm,
genitalia, and I'm just like, that is a blatant lie.
mm.
No five
I
or
still
six
go
year
with
old.
my 17-year-old to the doctor. So, yeah.
Yep. Well, that's right, because you need to drive them there first up,
Mm,
but they're not to be on their own. So the reasoning behind
mm.
giving the children this information before their time is fundamentally flawed.
No, I absolutely agree. And I just believe that our children need to be kept as innocent for as long as possible. And when I look through this program, there is not innocence in it. It's taking away my daughter's innocence and probably giving her more questions than answers. And she'll be coming home, and the dinner table conversation could be really interesting. So I'm just very aware now that whenever any programs, are sent out and are there, I will be going through them with a fine tooth comb. And I've told the principal that. And I said, you need to be sharing everything about these programs to your families, and you owe them that. I said, because this goes against everything I believe in. And he was really good. I have to say, I thought he might come out with, this is just the way the world's going now, but he didn't. He actually acknowledged it, and I think he's felt quite uncomfortable about most of it. Um, but he didn't shut us down or thought we were crazy parents. He totally did understand, I believe, where we were coming from, and was like, absolutely, and I will be doing this. So I did feel supported by him. So that was really great. Where I think there's probably a lot more principals out there, I know of a few, who have just said, oh, well, it's just what we're doing now. I just get over it and move on. It's what we're doing now. And it's like, well, no, it's actually not what we're not going to get over it, and we're not just going to do it.
No, and I think that's where parents need to be asking the question, because there is a massive range. We obviously hear more of the schools and the teachers that are principals that are trying to shut the parents out than the good ones, although we do hear the good ones because we're helping parents to go in and be really positive and proactive in their conversations. Like, we're not trying to harm the school, we're trying to do what's right for our children, and by oath we have the right to ask if we have a concern
Mm,
because we're a parent. So it's about coaching parents to be more assertive in asking, because the buck does stop with you with the child. It's not the school's right to take
mm,
the
mm.
responsibility away from the parent. um but it is tough, and so yeah, having strength in numbers, and like you were saying, having
Absolutely.
other
And
having other parents at the same school.
yeah. And I had a random person reach out to me and say, oh my goodness, I've heard that you've done this with this program. Can you help me? It's in my kid's school. So I totally said, absolutely, I can support you. I said, but you've got to stay calm. Don't go in crazy. You've just got to go in calm, and you've just got to ask the questions.
Yeah.
And you've just got to, know the information that's there and just be asking about it. But don't go off there shooting off because I think you're a mad nuts mum. And once you actually start making that noise and speaking to people, people don't want this. The majority of people don't want this for their children, right? So you've just got to always be watching out now. And that's why I homeschooled for so long, and now I'm back in the system. So I'm not sure how long I'll be back in the system for, but um,
But we need
meanwhile, I'm
people
here.
like you that have got your eyes and ears open, and you're
Yeah, and I do
willing
it.
to be able
I
to
do
talk
do
to
it
other
for the children. And just briefly, I was away at sports camp last week and talking to some other schools from low socioeconomic areas, and I said to them, these are intermediates, and I did say, oh, we've talked about education and how it's crazy and stuff going on. And I said, and all this health stuff and, rainbow stuff and confusing our kids. And he was like, nah, not at our school. We just teach reading, writing, and maths. Our kids can't even do that. We don't need all that other stuff. We're just reading, writing, and maths. And I was like, man, you know how awesome that is to hear? He goes, oh, we don't need that stuff planted in their heads. They can't even read or write. So that's our focus. And I was like, brilliant. So there are actually schools out there who are doing good things and are trying to push back on this, So it's good to know there are. I mean, I know there's some schools that have gone with it really quickly. But there are some good places out there who are trying to shut some of this down and just teach our kids what they need to know.
Yeah, and I actually have heard that about lower socioeconomic schools in the Auckland region, is that they're struggling to deal with some really basic stuff, right? So kids
Mm,
literally like aren't coming to school with food or don't know how to read and write. So this stuff,
mm,
I'm assuming the ministry isn't pushing it as a priority for them because they've got much more baseline things that they need to be dealing with. So maybe that is why some of this stuff is getting pushed more at the more middle to upper socioeconomic ones,
yeah,
because
yeah,
they're not
possibly.
having to deal with these basic societal needs. It doesn't fit into a socioeconomic box. It doesn't need to. But yeah, we just need to go back to the basics in education. It's just so ridiculous how hard the conversation is to actually just go back to the basics and take politics out, take all the
Mm,
fear and all of the fear mongering in society that they're putting on adults out of education and go back to what the child should be at school doing.
mm. And I also understand that, I mean, we've got an amazing family. You know, I've got an amazing husband and 4 children, and you know, and we're close and we talk. And I know there are broken families now, so it is good for some children to know that there are other places they can talk to, right? But
Mm.
we're really pushing it as a whole for everybody that you know families can't really be trusted anymore. You need to speak to somebody outside your family, and that doesn't fit, right? Like it's not. It's again, we're about minority, not majority, and that seems to be something we do in this country. We push the minority and we forget about the majority, and I see that's what happens here.
Yeah, definitely. Because that's the policies and the rules and the guidelines and legislation is written for the minority.
Mm,
I
mm.
think that's what it's done. Anyway, thank you for your time. Is there any final words you have for parents watching?
Please just always check your children's resources. Like if they announce you're doing a program, just go and look at it and keep clicking. I had to click like 5 or 6 times in to see the actual lesson plan and wording and things. So, and I've always said to all of my parents that I have, you're your child's only advocate. You are it. So if you don't stand up for them, no one's going to. And they need you now more than ever. So I'm the first one to stand up for my kids, and I always have, and I always will. And even if they don't want me to, I still do that. So just remember, you know, they're innocent. Let's keep them innocent and just be their advocate.
Yeah, thanks. And we'll put the links to the police one into our comments. But yeah, we just got to let our kids be kids, right, Emma?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let kids be kids.
Yeah. All good. Hey, thanks heaps for your time.
No worries. Thank you for having me.